Sweet. So we have, like I said, we have Ben and Heide from Reliquary Supply joining us today. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves to the rest of the group here. Yeah.
Hey, so my name is Heide. I am the owner of Reliquary Supply, and we just finished our first official year selling product, but we've been in business for a couple of years. I used to work at a parish as the director of RCIA, the director of religious education, and a campus minister for Eastern Michigan University. And from that experience, kind of found a need for sort of better Catholic goods, and was inspired exiting that situation to create Reliquary Supply with the help of my husband of 6 years, Ben. We are in our early 30s. We have 2 daughters, and we are so excited to be here. Get ready for some real behind the scenes. Like, this is what it's like. We're ready to help and share and give you some insight into what our journey is.
I'm Ben. I am designer, art director, a creative director, really, I guess, all the things for Reliquary Supply. Obviously, I'm his husband, and I'm a husband and father first. By day, I am a designer and art director at a small advertising agency in West Michigan. And by night and weekend, I am Reliquary's creative director. I've been in design for about, 14 years now total. Most of that spent at the agency that I work at now. We do a lot of advertising for a lot of different sort of local West Michigan companies, Steelcase, Merrill, Chaco, Brunswick, and also something you should know is I'm not good at these kinds of things, talking to a camera. So, but thanks to you all for having us on. We're excited to be here.
Awesome. I guess the first question to ask, and I guess the obvious question is, what made you guys start Reliquary Supply? What was the vision? I know, Heide, you kind of mentioned it briefly, but basically just take us on your whole journey of the idea, starting it and making it into a tangible business.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. So when I was an RCIA director, my program grew every year, and every year I wanted to do something for the people, the catechumens and candidates and first communicants around the Easter Vigil time. And so I would go looking for some really good, basic, beautiful pieces to sort of usher them into the church. And I couldn't find anything. And I had a budget for it. It wasn't it wasn't nothing. And so it was a huge point of frustration every single year.
It was really difficult. I remember conversations with you, you would talk about it being really difficult to find things that you connected with, or you thought the folks you had in your RCIA classes would connect with at the end of it. Because you had we were right next to Eastern Michigan University, and there were a lot of college students coming into the church or wanting to, and sort of that younger audience really looking for different things.
Yeah, I mean, it was there's just a huge gap there. And we would often look at each other and be like, I wish we had time to do this. And then my time came to an end at the parish, and ended up moving up to West Michigan. I was in the Ann Arbor area before, ended up moving to West Michigan, and slowly started putting together the idea for Reliquary Supply. We had a big inspo wall in our house for a year, so people would come over and see our giant, all of our designers and illustrators and like bad pieces up on the walls, like stay away from that, and like don't do this thing, but also do this thing. Just giving inspiration to like what we could do, and eventually we settled on trying to make something that was like very, very different right out the gate, that was like not validated as a piece that people wanted to pay a premium for, but also it was going to be like a defining piece for our brand. And that was a baptismal candle that was totally redesigned from the wick out. That was made as ethically as possible, with sustainable materials, with intention, with working with other Catholic creatives. And so that's what we did. We created a baptismal candle. It was a sort of a big investment to just like go out the gate, but that we took a year to develop that candle. The reason for that, it doesn't have to take that long for things, but the reason for that is I had two really, really small children. My daughters are 19 months apart. I was a stay-at-home mom, and I was dealing with postpartum depression at the time. So like all of that was like kind of compounded into, just working on this candle over the course of a year, doing what we could, and ended up launching it in September of 2019, and met with really great reception for that, which has kind of propelled us into being able to design and create new pieces as well. So that's kind of where we started. As far as like the business side of it goes, for like design wise, like how did you sort of figure out what Reliquary is supposed to look and feel like?
Yeah. So when we first started having conversations about this, it's actually way before what you talked about. You were still working as our RCA director at the church, and we took a trip, as many people do, to Rome. And it was my very first trip to Rome, and honestly, my very first trip to Europe. And it was really impactful in sort of the formation of the ideas surrounding this. Honestly, I was just completely in awe of how much art existed in every space we entered. The amount of masterworks in the four major basilicas, the craft and care put into the housings for relics, architectural marvels at like every turn. And it really made me come back and say, sort of, in a really like prideful, boastful way, like, what happened? Like, what happened to Catholic art? And so, knowing that in many ways, I wasn't going to come back and be like Michelangelo or any of those, masters. Obviously, I'm living in a different age, different time, different skill sets, and I'm not a master. So there's lots that we looked at in our lives, and we said, what skills does Heide have? What skills do I have? And what could we really bring to this space that would sort of take what's there in terms of tradition and really the intentionality behind a lot of Catholic objects and goods, and bring an alternative in some ways. So for me, one of the biggest things that was an inspiration, one of the biggest things to me just in design that's an inspiration is, surprise, surprise, minimalism. I'm sure everybody talks about minimalism all the time, so I'm not going to go on and on about that. But that was one of the things that from sort of the start was, I knew was going to have to be a pillar, because that's something that is a strong suit of mine as a designer. And I think when you take something down to its core essence, it often reveals a really beautiful idea. And the ideas and the intentionality were what we really wanted to shine in a lot of Reliquary's pieces. And obviously the art direction and all of that, but those in some ways came first, and in other ways had to, because essentially my time my job at the agency is super demanding and doesn't have a great work-life balance, as I'm sure a lot of artists can understand and designers can understand. So I was really like spending, a couple hours here, a couple hours there, and then in the midst of that, having two small kids and trying to figure out how that was all gonna happen and go down, and being a new dad at the time in a lot of ways through this process really is what made it take the length of time that Heide is talking about, for us to sort of take that idea coming off of, the trip to Rome and really sort of take the time to germinate it into what it is now. So.
Awesome. So next question, you guys mentioned that you have been open or started a year ago. And a lot of our community are people who are looking to start their own artistic business or are a part of one. But I guess just kind of to see how you like your guys' journey in this, but what are some of the greatest things you've learned, and what are some of the things that you've struggled with by starting Reliquary Supply?
Oh man, so many things. Here's the thing, and I knew this going in because I've known for a long time I wanted to have a business, is that failure is not a question. Of course, I'm going to fail and I'm going to lose and I'm going to have problems and I'm not going to know what to do and I'm going to have really bad days. Just recently, I had to go through a huge problem with my print resource. My original print resource for the holy water bottles ended up being really bad. They just did a really bad job and I didn't know what I didn't know. So I, sent out those bottles, and after learning the hard way that there were some problems with some of the printing, I had to circle back with the hundreds of people that had purchased those bottles and say, hey, there could be a problem with your bottle. And if there is, please let me know and I will fix it. That is something that I, of course, didn't ask for, or I'm necessarily at fault for, as I didn't know it was poorly done for some of the bottles, but I have to make it right. And I have to be making it right as soon as I know that there's a problem. And that was really painful. That happened just this past month, August, I think, August or July is when we found out that our original print resource was not good. So if you're ever out printing bottles, let me know and I'll tell you who not to go through. But yeah, so that was like really painful. So starting a business is going to be have that. And I've had a couple of them, several of them actually, that, just problems. I think expecting that and not letting it what do you call that? Sidetrack? No, detract, whatever. Get me off track, maybe that's the word, from the vision and the goal, and trusting that this is where I'm supposed to be, and, finding a workaround. Ultimately I had to spend a lot of money on that problem and mistake that has halted progress on other pieces, and that's okay, and that's just going to happen. We're going to have setbacks. When, the pandemic started out in February, we were 6 months in, right? And that was our big season. We were anticipating our big season for baptismal candles and holy water bottles and even crucifixes was going to be around Easter. And, it's gone. It's over. It's done. Nobody's having these celebrations. So our projections are going to be off, and we have more plans to do more things. So yeah, for I think a lot of people, when and myself too, hitting those walls of failure and just really low lows as a business, especially when there's money there, or money invested and risked, it's going to happen. And so that's the biggest thing I've learned is it's going to happen. It's going to happen more than once, and it's going to happen in big ways, and it's going to happen in small ways, and rolling with it is what's going to separate, you know, a business that has a chance of success and a business that doesn't. I have a lot of like great networks. I have a lot of great mentors, which I also highly recommend in business spaces. And I've connected with other Catholic companies in my space who I deeply respect and learn from. And those are all huge things that I've done to kind of solidify our foundation as a business. I have so much like business advice though, so we can stop there and maybe circle back to it. But there's just like so many things that I learned that have ended up being integral to our ongoing success. We're doing really well, and you know, we're meeting our goals, and we're growing, and we're excited, but there's been, you know, a lot that's gone into learning how to start on that track, you know. So I think that's what I have to say about that from a business standpoint.
Yeah. I don't.
I mean, I guess you've done like identities and brand designs for lots of different companies, and
yeah, I guess one of the biggest things is you know, kind of what you were saying, which is like a rising tide lifts all boats.
Mm-hmm.
And so really not looking at other folks and other brands from the start. We knew we wanted to be really intentional with not looking at other folks as competition, but looking at them as you know, aides and folks that we could befriend and work together with, coworkers in a way. So we really looked to do that. And then the other thing is, honestly, I've learned a lot from you about just connecting with the right folks, the right resources, the right people to help get things done. And that's what's allowed us to really, in many ways, like do what we've done and get it accomplished. Mm-hmm. While I'm the person who like can start off a brand and can like help it continue, I'm not always the person who can follow through with every part or piece. And so obviously that's where you come in. So
tell me, baby.
How does the follow through?
Sweet. I wanted to circle back a little bit to something that Ben mentioned a while ago, just about you know, the inspiration of going into like these huge cathedrals, seeing the art in the cathedral. And this is something that our whole community kind of wants to delve deeper in, and that's the whole position of us as Catholic creatives in the church, and what does that mean for us. So my question to you guys is, how has your creativity in the church and being artists in the church influenced your faith? How has it grown your faith, basically? And how has it like basically come back full circle, back into Reliquary Supply, back into your art?
That's a big question.
That is a good question. That's a great question. So
I can talk about it first.
Yeah. Go for it.
We have a good flow. I'm the one that talks usually first, and he's the one that talks deeply and richly. So for me, okay, I'm just gonna be honest. Like, so I'm a convert to Catholicism, and I became Catholic when I was 17, almost 18, and was immediately like zealous about it. You know, so I was like into all the mainstream Catholic things, and you know, reading all the books and all the big Catholic celebrities, and you know, calling in on Catholic Answers and all that stuff. You know, like listening, all the things. And then, you know, so I got my degree in communications, cinema, and digital media. I started working in a parish so that I could like help build up the body of Christ in like an evangelical way. Because that's my background also, is evangelical Christianity. And what ended up happening is that I was so saturated in this kind of this, honestly, to me, where I was at with my faith, it was a lot of it was one note. This is what Catholic looks like. We read these books, we believe these things, we listen to these speakers, we go to these conferences. This is Catholic. And coming out of that experience at the church, in the parish, what I realized is that my faith, my personal faith, had actually like dwindled quite a bit working at this parish, because I was surrounded by a community that didn't, it was a very insular, like there's a lot of problems there in a lot of ways, just because we didn't have a greater vision for what beauty looks like and what truth can look like. Not truth like capital T truth, but just like, you know, living out the faith. What does love look like? There's not like a prescribed way that love looks. And so we, or, you know, for me, Reliquary has been like an alternative look at what love and beauty and goodness and truth look like. How can we communicate what's there? Ben was talking about that core essence. And, you know, we're not going to match necessarily, we're not going to match stride with like the Michelangelos or the Berninis, but maybe we can distill, you know, all of this like big Catholic culture that may or may not be good down to like its essence and communicate that. So that has actually really helped my faith and been part of that like regrowth, I guess, in being more Catholic now than I ever was, immersed in these like cultures that didn't quite communicate the fullness, and I'm not saying that we communicate the fullness, but
it's just added to your understanding.
Yeah, it's added to it. It's grown it, and in a very healthy and necessary way. I don't know if that answers your question at all, but now it's Ben's turn.
Yeah, I think, and forgive me, it's been a minute, so now I'm not sure exactly what the question was, but I'll try and answer it anyways based on what I remember. I think ultimately, for me, one of the biggest things was coming to that realization of there's a real beauty in the truth of the church. And like I talked about, distilling it down to its essence, when you get to that core idea of, you know, any piece that you have in the church, whether it's like a chalice or, you know, a holy water bottle, is that the thing, is the beauty, what is it trying to communicate? The beauty is in the idea. And so for me, Heide talked a little bit about her faith journey. I grew up Catholic. I went to college, left the church. Ultimately, years later, through a lot of study and learning, came back to the church, a different person than I was before, and with a new understanding, sort of came back in, and then that's right around the time that Heide and I met, and I'm trying to think where I was going with that.
Well, I think he was asking about like our faith journey and how does that connect to Reliquary Supply.
Oh, yeah. So anyways, I left the church largely, and then ate, slept, and breathed art. Because I went to college, I went to art school, and I took too many credits every semester and still only graduated in 5 years. So it was one of those things where I did that for a really long time and looked at my life sort of at some point in that process and said, you know, is this good? Is this good for me? Is this the thing that I'm going to stake my life on? And ultimately the answer was no, which is a lot of the reason that I came back to the church, because I knew that the reason for my life was bigger than that. And so when I talk about art, oftentimes it's wrapped up in that sort of like throwing myself so far into it that it became my God in a lot of ways. So when I think about and talk to creatives about inspiration, a lot of times I tell them it's really important to have something outside of design. So I see a lot of designers who sort of like, especially like when I was younger, I came out of school and that was my world. I didn't do anything else. I didn't have time for anything else. It was my job, and then it was what I was doing outside of my job. And so, you know, for me, it's been really important to find ways to get away from that. And one of the big ones, ultimately, as I started working at the agency that I'm at now, and was sort of coming out of this phase in my life, was going to the cathedral near my work. And it was a place during the stresses of, you know, deadlines and trying to deliver to clients and having like huge meetings with, you know, boardrooms and things like that. It was the kind of thing that really centered me. And I came to really grow a new appreciation for it over that time. And honestly, I think that's really helped me in my process. And then beyond that, a lot of folks in the creative field know that there's a research step that happens in a lot of projects. A lot of the process is research. And so Reliquary Supply in a lot of ways has changed me, because I've had to delve really deeply into the research of certain items and objects, and what the church, you know, the meanings behind things are. And there's a depth there that is really incredible and intentional, and oftentimes is really beautiful. And so finding the beauty in those objects and really delving into the research of that has really grown me personally in my faith. And so that's just that's a small part of it too. So I hope that answers the question. Probably just going around in circles here, circling it until we get there.
No, it does. Thank you guys for sharing that. That's awesome. I guess on a more lighthearted question, what has been your guys' favorite, I guess, Reliquary Supply product that you've made? Like, what was the most fun you've had?
Okay.
What's yours?
So my favorite is any of them that I don't have to make myself. I currently make the candle, and I can't trust anyone to do the candle the way I do it exactly. I don't have a resource for that yet, so it's a lot of work for me. But I don't know. I actually think the crucifix or upcoming Advent wreath is maybe my favorite, because we work with a pair of Catholic woodworkers and have partnered with them to, you know, Ben creates the product design, and, you know, we work with them to like execute in a way that makes sense. And that's maybe my favorite piece, because it's really the crucifix and the Advent wreath, which nobody has seen yet, which is also made of wood. Yeah, that's probably my favorite, because of the story and the connection and the relationship sort of behind it, creating this piece that's an heirloom that goes in homes and doesn't look like anything else out there currently. So yeah, that's maybe my favorite. How about yours?
I think it would be the candle, probably, to start. Even though it was the hardest, in many ways, it was where we established the brand. It's where we had a lot of those sort of initial conversations that really set the tone for what we were going to be doing. We went through rounds of design, rounds and rounds and rounds, and ultimately it helped me get to know you better, and that was really fun. And
Not always.
not always. I wasn't super easy to work with all the time, but it was a lot of fun to establish a brand, especially being a person who's largely worked for others my entire career. Being able to establish a brand for us was really exciting, and it was really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the candle. Long answer.
Yeah, love your guys' stuff. I'd say the candle too is one of my favorite pieces. Definitely one of my favorite pieces. Love it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Final question from me. And I guess it's something that I've asked previous speakers too, but what is your biggest piece of advice for the next generation of artists for the church?
Okay, I know this one. I'm gonna get up close. My little dog is here and just like super heavy on my lap, so I'm gonna take him with me. There is space for you and we need you, and please do what you can to contribute. That's my biggest piece of advice, because I know a lot of people think that it's saturated, that nobody wants what they have, nobody's looking for it, and all of those. That is not true at all. A lot of people enter the Catholic business space as a small business owner, and they look at places like, the Catholic Company or Autumn or like these big box Catholic stores, and they're like, it's already there. Like, they're already doing 10,000 different prayer cards. And they're like, well, no, you can do it better. We can do it better. We can make the paper feel good. We can saturate the colors in just the right way. Like we need you. And I just want to encourage people. The church doesn't necessarily pay and work, and the Catholics that have the most money are often pretty conservative with their funds. So it can be hard to sort of connect with those people who are going to find a redesign of something, worth it. We know this personally, but at the same time, having pieces out there and sort of inspiring other people to do better and make more and connect with each other. I feel like that's going to be an antidote in so many ways to, people seeing Catholics and saying, y'all are stuck in, 100 years ago, 200, 500 years ago. What's here for me? Because, we're not in the Middle Ages anymore. And as a former parish, worker, I know that's what a lot of people still see us as. So anyway, that's my advice is do it, find a way, to do it. But also the other advice I'm going to say is ask for what you're worth. Ask for what you're worth. Please ask for what you're worth. Find
a way to make it worth your time and your energy.
Yep.
Because that's really important. Otherwise you won't keep doing it.
Yeah. You'll get mad and you'll be taken advantage of happily. People in the church will take advantage of you happily, and justify it oh, we're all Catholic, so, of course you're going to cut me a deal. And the reality is, if we're all Catholic, we all understand who holds the purse strings. So maybe they should pay me a little more because money is not ours. It belongs to the Lord, that little mind game that people play. So, and maybe, it is a struggling new, I don't know. You helped me with a bunch of different projects at the church, but at the church when I worked at the church that were worth it, even though you weren't paid for those.
Yeah, there's a time and place, of course.
But some of them weren't worth it, and you should have gotten more sleep than you have gotten in your life because of those projects. So yeah, I don't know. I'm really passionate about this. I am constantly working with Catholic creatives and insisting that they charge me more money as a business because they are worth more, and I don't want them to degrade their worth because they're working with a Catholic company. I value you, and you deserve to be paid what makes sense for you, not what you think, I'm going to want to work with. And if it's out of my budget, then we can have that conversation. But so far, mostly it's just been me saying, why aren't you charging me more? That's mostly it. So yeah, those are my very passionate, all of my passionate advice right there. Do you have any? You
nailed it. I'll piggyback off of the one thing you said by saying, the space for you. There's a space for you comment by saying, really, art and design in many ways is subjective. And while a lot of people find that depressing, I find it really inspiring And to me, that really supports what you were saying of there's a space for you and for the type of work that you do in this field. So I know we all get imposter syndrome. We all feel like we shouldn't, be doing this. Me especially in the beginning, like I was like, hey, I left the church. Am I qualified to be doing this? Should I start down this path? Am I ready to do this? And ultimately, the answer was yes. And throw yourself into it and do the research, spend the time, and then there will be a space for you. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Thank you guys for sharing that. Those are all the questions from me. But I want to open it up. We have time for 1 or 2 questions from the people here. So if any of you guys have any questions for Heide and Ben, feel free to type them in the chat. We have time for 1 or 2 questions here. But while we're waiting, I want to say thank you to you two for sharing. Super inspired with a lot of what you guys said. And big fan of your work, obviously. And thank you for what you do for the church. And thank you for just inspiring the young people in the church. So thank you guys.
Yeah, I mean, that's such an honor. Like,
we wouldn't be here without the forum. Thank you for setting all this up and doing what you do. It's a really big deal.
Ben didn't know that I sent you that picture of us, like, looking at each other lovingly. And he's like, what's this? Like, it's fine. We look good. It's fine.
Oh, yeah. Great. Okay, we have 1 question here from Jazz. Advice on budget planning. She didn't mean to yell at you guys, but yes, advice on budget planning.
So here's something that I learned the hard way. I spent hundreds of dollars this summer hiring a CFO, a chief financial officer, to sort of come in and look at all of my financials, which are admittedly very small. I have like 3 products, so it's not like that complicated. And what she did was she helped me pick through all of my expenses and what my products actually cost. For me, including like paying myself at least $15 an hour. And so that was extremely helpful because if you're not making a profit, you don't have a budget to work from.
And count your time. Count your time.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that you were leaving out in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I was leaving out my time. I was like sort of throwing out like, oh, but I use maybe a foot of, recycled butcher craft paper for this, so it's fine. It's only a foot, but that adds up after 400 orders, right? Like, so for budget planning, you like breaking it down bit by bit and really getting to know how much it costs to like make a thing so that you can sell it at a place that makes sense for you. People in the space, in the Catholic goods space, often sell things all over the board because a lot of people don't do this. But if you want a sustainable cash flow, then breaking it down and knowing exactly what you're working with is going to be helpful. As a result of my conversation with that CFO, I ended up raising my prices because I found out I was actually losing money on some of my pieces and that it wasn't worth it. Now, some pieces have less of a margin and are more for like the crucifix. We don't have a big margin on that, which is just fine. It's needed to exist, but also like knowing that and making informed decisions with my budget has been extremely helpful and has enabled us to continue to develop more products because that costs a lot of money too. So
I think too, like something even before that you learned was about the margins specifically.
Oh yeah.
What margins you need to be getting to make your business profitable and actually stay a business versus like from a tax standpoint going back to a hobby.
Yes. Yep.
So those were conversations that we had up front, or that you had up front largely, that really informed how you set even your initial prices.
Yep.
And even then, it was more and more conversations had to be had.
Yeah.
So just keep having those conversations with people that know.
Yeah, and feel free to connect with me if you have more questions on that. But because I love talking about it, and I love helping other people grow as well, because I've learned things very painfully and nobody else has to go through it.
I'm still gonna ask more questions because this is something that I'm like so clueless about, and it's also like my first year like launching my brand, so like I'm gonna be DMing you.
Please, 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 please. Super into it.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. This one's from Caitlin. What is your advice on finding inspiration during a mental block?
Oh man, I can speak to this one.
A massive blow, is that the word?
Of mental block.
Mental block, oh yeah.
So, Caitlin, thank you for your question. I hate those. They're never fun. So there's a couple different ways that I'll do it. But I think one of them is it's important in a way to let your subconscious work. If you haven't gotten away from your computer, if you haven't gotten away from your tablet, whatever you're working on, get away from it if you can spare the time. Take some time to take a walk. If you only have a quick break, take a quick walk around the block and then come back to it. Oftentimes that's just enough of a reset for me to sort of keep going. If it's something bigger and you find that doesn't work, oftentimes what I'll do is I'll go back to the research step of my process, especially for me just as a designer. I don't know what discipline you are, Caitlin, but as a graphic designer, oftentimes I'll step back in my process. I'll go back to the research phase. I'll go back to an inspiration phase. That's when we have a lot of sort of like when we'll butt heads over something and it just won't be sort of like getting to where it needs to go, and Heide will be like, it's just not quite, I don't know how to put it into words, it's just not where it needs to be. Oftentimes it takes going not back to the drawing board, because that's really, oftentimes that white InDesign document is very
demoralizing.
very scary. But stepping a step back in your process, really, I've found to be really helpful. And then, that beyond that, finding inspiration, I would say another thing that helps is oftentimes I will look in the wrong place for inspiration, or I'll look for a really long time at like design sites for inspiration, when what I need to do ultimately to get to the place that I need to go is look somewhere else adjacent to it. So for me, it's like, go play a video game and appreciate the art in that for a minute. Listen to a good, album on Spotify. Figure out what it is that's sort of adjacent to what you're working on and look at that. So for us, it was a lot of like interior design and architecture. So in a lot of ways, don't discount that there's inspiration everywhere, and oftentimes that can help you get to much. And it helps me get to a more original idea than oftentimes just getting stuck scrolling, work that makes me like look at people and be like, oh my gosh, that's so good. That's the idea right there. That's the one. They did it already. Oh no. So looking adjacent to what you're doing, or looking at other areas for that inspiration, and sort of helps jog you back into, or get me back on track sometimes. So anyways, those are the 3 ways. I hope that was helpful.
Sweet. Thank you guys. All right. I think we can fit in one more question if that's okay with you guys. Sweet. So Brooke asked, did you guys ever feel called by God to create your company? If so, what were the signs and what can we do to discern our own?
So this is something I haven't talked about yet, but Okay, so I have like a mission background. I did a lot of like mission work. That's actually how I ended up in Michigan, because I'm originally from the West Coast, from Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. And I was doing like mission work in Detroit, and then I ended up going and living in Calcutta for a while, and then came back to work at a parish. But I have always known that for me that my talents are really elsewhere. My degree is not in like theology or anything like that. So I definitely felt like my gifts could be utilized in a way that was more purposeful. And I've also, both my parents are entrepreneurs, and I always knew that, being an entrepreneur is a way to make a lot of money. That's a way. It also would lose a lot of money. We have found that out too. But make a lot of money. And from my mission background, I knew that, we live in like, white suburbia in West Michigan. We are great here, but we can do more with the many, many privileges that we enjoy. And one of those things is, my networks and mentors and connections and Ben's design to create a business that is profitable, that can funnel money to groups working on the corporal works of mercy, because that's how I got involved with mission work. So I felt super called by God, very convicted to do that, because I'm a white middle-class woman, who, doesn't have to live paycheck to paycheck. And most of my family is that way. And the amount of privilege that comes with me saying that, it's like I know. And so that's why Reliquary Supply is it's really my yes to God. Like, God, I'm going to spend, I'm sorry, I'm getting teary. I'm going to spend everything that I can to use this unearned privilege that I have and give it back to the communities that deserve it, that have been without for a long time. I've struggled with the white saviorism in the past too. Just I've got all this stuff. I'm going to go into these communities and serve the poor and all this stuff. And there's some more things I can say about that and my journey on that. I'm definitely on a journey, but Reliquary Supply is how I've realized that, all of the things come together to create a space that's we've got a mission, and that mission is to give. So yeah, that's how God has called my company. At the end of my life, everything burns, right? We can't take anything with us. Nothing matters in that way, materially. What matters is what we do with the time we've been given and the talents we've been given. Am I going to multiply it and use what I've been given? The 10 talents or whatever. Am I going to make it 20, or am I going to just live my little life, with my little dog and my little kids and, whatever, So, and
there's a lot of validity in that too, obviously.
And people are called to different things. Yes. So I'm not going to speak to people who feel that way currently. I'm not speaking into or judging other people who live that life. I'm just saying, for me and my conviction and my heart and my journey, all of that. Sorry, he knows I'm getting, passionate. For me, and that's very important for me, this is where I've come to today. And I'm a work in progress, and I've probably said some things wrong, and I don't want to center the conversation about me, but with a company, that's the idea. And so, connecting with other companies, Catholic companies in this space who are doing similar things. Some of my favorites are The Living Person with Jarrell Season and Be a Heart with Erica Campbell. Those are two of my pals, and we talk all the time, and we're all working towards similar goals. So yeah, I just I just, yeah. So that's, to answer your question, sort of like, that's how I know, because I've spent a lot of time doing it wrong, and I'm trying to do it right, and I'm still probably doing it wrong, but working forward to do it more right, to give a better yes, you know?
So to piggyback off that, again, I'm saying that again, I think to answer the second part of the question, which is what were the signs, and what can we do to discern our own? I think for me, it was a lot of looking back at my life and wanting that purpose, wanting to find that place, because while I have a career and it supports my family and does all the things, it's not overtly serving in a way, if that makes sense. And while obviously there's lots of ways to serve, for me, I always felt called to use those talents that I had been given in some way in service of the church, which I think is probably some of the people in this group too. So in a lot of ways, it was looking back and saying, what do I have that I'm particularly gifted with? What are my gifts? And then how can I use those? Or and honestly, getting it wrong. So like for a long time, I wanted to start like a video game based charity, and always had a project in mind that I was working towards or thinking about, and ultimately never came to fruition. And then when Heide started Reliquary, that was, in those conversations, that was like, this is it. This is the thing. I think this is the thing. So it was a lot of sort of looking back at what I had in terms of gifts, and looking back at what events in my life sort of drove me to this thing, and saying, is this right? Is this right? Is this right? And asking sort of over and over again, and in many ways. So it wasn't just one thing.
Great. Thank you, guys. That's all the questions that we have time for today. Thank you, Ben and Heide, once again for sharing and just being so open to be sharing your journey individually, but also just with your company as well. So thank you guys so much, and thank you for what you do for the church again.